catch the wave. Life is all highs and lows. Others fall.
How's my hair?
Well, this is the whole focus of today's
That's right.
show is the hair, right? So that's the whole part of it. So Brian, today we're going to have a conversation about a really timely topic when you think about the world that we live in, and especially social media. And I'd like to talk about how people have this need for validation. But the song that you want to focus on today is actually a different way to look at validation, and by thinking about validation from the perspective of mindful validation. What's the song that you want to focus on today?
Go Your Own Way, Fleetwood Mac, which isn't, at first listen, and when you pay attention to the lyrics, isn't about anything but unrequited love. However, I always looked at it differently. I always looked at it as do your own thing, taking the positive spin on that.
Why do you think people are so resistant to doing their own thing or going their own way?
Well, I think people are resistant to change, first of all. And, through the years, as you know, here at RockStar ReInvention, we talk about reinventing because a lot of times change happens when you don't expect it, when you don't want it. And so I think change has this stigma to it that change is bad, but it's really not. It really isn't. Going against the grain has always worked for me. It's how I joined the military and went against everything that, my family had done and everything that my friends were doing. I decided I just wanted to go into the military and gain some knowledge and get some stories in my songs, and from there, the changes we've made in the music industry, and decided not to sign with another label, a major label, and going independently, going my own way. All of these things have worked for me. There are occasions when it doesn't work, but people fear that. I mean, there's a lot to fear. You have to take the leap. I mean, people say make the leap, take the leap. And who wants to take that leap blindly? But sometimes that's the only way. And a lot of times when you're standing on that cliff and you're ready to take the leap, the cliff falls out from under you, which has happened numerous times. And a lot of people are thankful for that because they did make that leap.
I think you bring up a really good point there too. Sometimes when you're, standing there on the cliff, getting ready to take the leap, most of the time you could be alone. And so I think that's the risk that people see when they think that they're doing their own thing or going their own way. They could end up alone if they're wrong.
Right.
Why do you think people are so afraid of being alone?
Well, I mean, I think that we're, society, the way that we're brought up, human beings, typically brought up by your parents, you're nurtured, you come out completely helpless. Unlike other animals who have a longer period, is it gestation period, I believe it's called. Mm-hmm. They have that longer period where they're in the womb, where a horse can come out and be on its own, standing immediately. Humans are so dependent upon others from the very beginning, from our birth, that we feel like we need to depend on each other or somebody, friends, family, for the rest of our lives. Never really taken the time to focus on themselves, to meditate about themselves, to embrace who they are, to figure out who they are through that meditation, and just mindfulness. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think, again, making the leap just by being alone and spending time with yourself is a very scary thing. Because who knows if somebody's going to come back, you don't know when you're a kid, you might be left alone for a short period of time. And there might be that bit of panic that's like, oh, my parents going to come back, is something going to happen to them? But what we're talking about here is, as an older adult, is not necessarily glomming on to a certain group, to doing your own thing, But first, finding your focus on your own. And that's very important.
And I think what you're talking about there is then identifying where the validation should come from. And
Right.
sometimes when you're alone and you get a chance to regroup and review, like we talk about in RockStar ReInvention, sometimes you can find out that what you're actually seeking validation for could come in a different way. And that was one of the key stories in your reinvention story. So wouldn't you think that reinvention itself qualifies as going your own way?
Absolutely. It depends on the reinvention, of course, but in order to reinvent, you have to think outside of the box. You can't follow somebody else's reinvention. I mean, you can, but it's very short-term benefits. You have to think outside of the box. You have to use the right side of your brain, the creative side of your brain, thinking outside of the box in order to truly reinvent your situation.
And I think that's what's so interesting is that song that you talked about with Go Your Own Way by Fleetwood Mac, right?
Right.
You heard when you were how old?
Oh boy, I was I think it was in 8th grade. Had to be 8th grade because that was the year of the Afro.
Yeah. And so that's the year of the Afro. Back then, that had a whole different meaning for you in terms of you probably were looking for validation because you're a teenager. I think you mentioned that you were getting ready to move to a new town, and that's where the validation becomes so important. And now as you look back on that song, it has a whole different meaning for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, you move into that new town thinking I'm going to be the hip kid because everybody in my town was just getting into either having your hair parted in the middle because of disco or, getting curly hair, an afro. And I thought I was going to go to this new town, but this town was a little bit ahead. They had been there and done that 5 years ago. And so I was isolated, I was ostracized. I was bullied and, all of these things, but it forced me to spend time on my own in my room, playing the guitar, listening to new music, reading books that I loved, and literally, going my own way, forging my own new path, which led me to where I am today.
So do you think that you would have been where you are today as a musician that you are if you hadn't experienced that hardship and that validation that you didn't receive back when you first moved?
Yeah, if I had my choice back then, I would have not gone my own way. I would have been very popular. I would have done what everybody else was doing. And I would have got sucked into that normal kind of life where you stay in the same small town and there's nothing wrong with any of this. But for me personally, I knew what I wanted to do. And that was not a path for me. I could not stay in my small town and still be a rock star, which is what I wanted all the while,
I think part of that, the key takeaway here is that the isolation led to inspiration for you. And without
Perfect. Isolation leads to inspiration. You've got to get that on a t-shirt, Simon Hernandez.
We should get that.
You will.
Yeah, we'll get that on a t-shirt and then we'll make sure that our top viewers get a copy, get a t-shirt for themselves too. So in your blog, you talk about how this all started because you and your mom and your aunt were all in a room and as they were working on their hair.
In the kitchen. Yeah.
In the kitchen.
I got put into rotation. My mom would curl my aunt's hair and my aunt would curl my mom's hair. They put, permanents. They'd put that chemical in it and they'd put their hair up in rollers. And I thought, well, disco was in and I was like, my hair is not parting in the middle the way I want. So I'm going to get my hair curly. And I convinced them to put me in the mix, in the rotation. And then I was doing, my mom's hair. My aunt was doing my hair. My mom was doing my aunt's hair. And so I was in that rotation, it's just ridiculous. I can still smell that chemical. Awful. I had to look it up to see if people even do that anymore. And they do. People still do perms,
Well, do you still have bad hair days today at all? Or
when I do, here's what it is. What you do. Done. It's like no issues. No issues. Oh, my hair. Like this is a bad hair day for me right here. something going on here. You know?
But I appreciate you bringing that Fleetwood Mac song to our viewers' attention, because they now get a chance to look at that song in their own way, in a different way. And I know you're going to share your version of that song with them now, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
Awesome. So here's Brian Vander Ark doing Go Your Own Way by Fleetwood Mac in his own way.
Loving you isn't the right thing to do. How can I ever change things that I feel? If I could, baby, I'd give you my world. How can I when you won't take it from me? You can go your own way, go your own way. You can call it another lonely day and go your own way. You can go your own way, go your own way. Tell me why everything's turned around. Packing up, shacking up's all you wanna do. If I could, baby, I'd give you my world. Open up, everything's waiting for you. You can go your own way, go your own way. You can call